All right. It's my pleasure to introduce our next presenter. Ms. Diane Allison joined the Legislative Auditor in May of 2021 as Director of Local Government Services, having served as Chief Financial Officer in 3 different local governments for a combined total of 17 years. LLA's Local Government Services primarily oversees the work of more than 2,800 independent CPA firms that conduct over 3,600 audits and other types of engagements, educates local governments on governmental accounting and internal controls, provides financial, operational, and compliance advice to local governments, and prepares fiscal notes for the Louisiana legislature. Diane's area of expertise are accounting and financial reporting, financial management, budgeting, fiscal policies, internal controls, fiscal compliance, and school activity funds. Please welcome Ms. Diane Allison.
Well, hello everybody. It's great to be with you today. And this is the purpose of this presentation. I don't want you to think it's a boring subject because it's not. Okay? And I want you to get inspired and motivated to think about your own accounting procedures manual and think about how you can make it better, or for those poor souls who don't have one, like how in heaven's name do I get started? And any procrastinators in the audience? Okay, so those of you who are procrastinating, we're going to work with you too, and we're going to help you to get started on the Accounting Procedures Manual. It is definitely a document that we need, very, very important for that. All right, so you all know Mike. He met us this morning, and you know a lot about our office, more than some of you probably realize from this morning's presentation about exactly what the Legislative Auditor's Office does, which is a whole lot of things in a variety, and basically can be summed up with what the legislature tells us to do because they are our bosses. And one thing about your accounting procedures manual, first tip, go to our website. We have lots and lots of good resources on the website. You see where it says best practices? That's a good place to start. There are best practices on all kinds of major accounting cycles that we have, major accounting processes like collections, like disbursements, and revenue, and traffic tickets, and evidence, and things like that. So that's a really, really good place to start. There are also, when you go under legal assistance, there are all kinds of documents, white papers, and that they are flowcharts on all of these laws, and that will also help you to get your written procedures to make sure that they're in compliance with laws. So for today's presentation, I'm going to learn about the distance that I get to walk and still click. On the Accounting Procedures Manual, first we're going to start kind of like at the conceptual level, and we're going to talk about laws, policies, and procedures, and they get increasingly more narrow, but in order to have your procedures right, you've got to understand the interplay between those three. And then we're gonna, this is the motivational, inspirational part of the presentation where I'm gonna tell you the benefits of it, and hopefully all of you, I'll see some heads nod, okay, she finally convinced me to put it in writing after all this time. And then we're gonna talk about writing one, you know, and what does that look like? And how do I get started, Diane? It just seems like a great big task. How do I get started? Give me an example. So we'll go through some of that. All right, let's talk about laws and the characteristics of laws. Because you cannot have a procedure that violates laws. Like our question in the last session where they said, what if our home rule charter said we have to give 12 hours notice for a public meeting instead of 24? Can we do that? No. That's why you have to know the laws. Okay, so it kind of starts there. And you know that those are usually adopted. Those are adopted by some superior government, like the feds to the states to the locals, and by some superior to an inferior government. There definitely is a very long process we'll take a look at. The laws are written and accessible. For those of you who don't know, the legislature's website is there. They have all the laws. Now look, I didn't go to law school. I had my I can't remember, 1 or 2 business law classes that you need to sit for the CPA exam, and I'm done. And that was my lowest score on the CPA exam. However, it was passing. So I'm thankful for that. I don't know a thing about the law, but you can go here and you can do some research, okay? But that's for a novice. You know, go to your general counsel when you really have detailed questions for that. But it's a good place to start. And there's also an aspect of the law that's called a reasonable person's interpretation. And when it comes to finance laws, what is that reasonable person's interpretation? So that comes into play. Laws can be very general. They can also be very concise. So you saw on our slides, introduction slides, that we have millage workshops going on right now. And Joanne is here. So one thing you know about that, don't fool with that law. That law is not general. That law is extremely concise. Extremely. You have to know size of the font in the newspaper. Like, we're talking really, really detailed. So some laws get like that. Other laws, not so much. Like Jennifer was talking about the Local Government Budget Act. So what's the deal about that? We don't have a template. You know, it says it has to be by function and by object, basically, but there's no template. There's no one size fits all, because you're going to have different line items if you're a city versus if you're a sheriff's office versus if you're a school district. You know, so laws, you have to know that, general or concise. They generally apply to all of us. However, especially if you're new to government, just go read, because while there are general rules about, for example, when you need to approve your budget, there are actually very specific rules, and some legislators have rules that are unique only to their one government. So, and those laws do get passed. For all of our friends in St. Tammany Parish, they're going to remember back about 10 years ago, Act 774. It only applied to St. Tammany Parish, okay? So you have to know, and you have to read, and you need to know. So especially if you're new to government, go find out. You might even want to do a search on your parish or your municipality to find out what is that. Laws are enforced. They're enforced by governments, and some have penalties, some don't. Okay, so, you know, what's the penalty if you don't post your open meetings agenda within 24 hours? Nobody's going to jail. It's not criminal, okay? But there are other penalties that could derive from that. And some have, as we know, on the criminal side of things, there are a boatload of penalties on that. Laws are applied by courts. So when there's a disagreement, you go to court, the judges work it out. Not so much with policies. Not so much there. And they are definitely developed through a process that is just, put your glasses on. Okay, so this is the process of how a law gets chosen. These are not laws like in my house, Diane gets to say what the law is. So for example, my husband will fuss because I say bedtime is 9 o'clock. Sometimes he don't want to go to bed at 9 o'clock. Sometimes he does, but I go to bed at 9 o'clock. Why? Because I wake up early and I need a full night's sleep. So then I proceed to tell him, okay, that it's okay, I'm going to bed. You do whatever you want, but I'm going to bed. So he follows me, of course. So I get to make laws in my house, not so much of a process, no due process at all. I just get to say that. Not so much here. So what happens, generally speaking, I'm going to summarize this for you because some of you will recognize this process. Okay, so generally speaking, bills have 3 hearings. They get introduced generally in the House, but there are Senate bills. There are 3 hearings, first to the General Assembly, or first it's introduced, this is only if a law passes. So the process I'm describing to you is not going to happen if it doesn't become a law. We're just assuming that it makes it through the whole process. Introduced, it goes to the committee for a hearing, then it goes to that house, either the House or the Senate, that chamber for a full vote. And then it goes to the next chamber, and it's the same process. Introduced, committee, full chamber for a vote. Still, then you have it, and it's passing, okay? But it doesn't always become a law. What happens next? Number one, if they're different, and they usually are, you need a reconciliation of the two. So you'll get a committee together and you'll reconcile the two. Okay, now you've got a piece of legislation you like. Is it a law? Not yet, not yet, because the governor has to have action. It goes to the governor now. The governor has three choices. The governor can sign it into law. The governor can veto it. That still doesn't mean it won't become a law because it can be overridden. It goes back to the legislature and it can be overridden. And the third thing he can do is just hands off and it just becomes a law by passage of time. So there is a process in that. Not really the process we go through for our policies, right? But some of us may have a very similar process for our policies. So our policies are only apply to us, only apply to our organizations, and our governing body adopts our policies. And some of you will have a due process. Some of you may have more than one reading, particularly if your policies are adopted by ordinance. Then you're going to have to follow the processes for ordinances, right? So there is a process there. They are also written down in an authoritative document. We're going to talk about communication a little bit later on that. And generally they're concise. Policies are, because they want to leave it up to the chief executive, whether it's a mayor, a superintendent, or whatever, the parish president, to decide details, which are what we're going to have in the how to execute it, which are in the accounting procedures manual. And they're written for our broad audience, meaning our jurisdiction. The people, the employees who work, and the way our particular municipality or jurisdiction is operated, and they are developed through a process. All right, now, policies, it's a good idea to review your policies, okay? So you need to review your policies regularly. You're gonna know your policies, financial policies, and when you're in the finance office, you should know them better than anybody else. So you know some may not change. Like fiscal agent for banking maybe, or something like that. You may not need to look at that one frequently, but other ones like open meetings law that Jennifer talked about, you're going to have to look at that. Why? Because the law changed. Public records, the law changed. So you're going to have to want to look at those. So this is what happens when you don't, laws not so much, because they have to have a bill to introduce to repeal. So what we have in Louisiana when laws don't get checked is that you're not allowed to tie an alligator to a fire hydrant. Now, I thought about this and I said, you know what? Who introduced that bill? That's going to be the firefighters who must have a strong lobbying that says, look, when we go have to connect our hose to a fire hydrant, we don't want to fight an alligator. Snakes are not allowed within, 200 yards of a Mardi Gras parade. This is not addressed to the snakes. I hope they abided by this law, but it's probably addressed to snake owners who think it might be cute to have a real boa around your neck during Mardi Gras time. What else? If you are a snorer, all the windows have to be closed and locked, not just closed, so that your neighbor can get a good night's sleep. There's a law. Now, for those people, and you all may have them in your towns, who go to services for the food, there is a limit on the number of sandwiches. So how many people are standing there enforcing the number of sandwiches? You had 3 already. Don't take another sandwich. It's against the law. For those fine folks who live in Abbeville, don't forget that you are not allowed to roller skate on the sidewalk. In other places, yes, not in Abbeville. And our favorite one in Louisiana, it is illegal for fans to insult the players. Now, I thought long and hard about this one, and I'm like, okay, does that mean it's okay to insult the referees and the coaches? Players, don't insult the player. Find somebody else to blame. All right, so that's what you know. The moral of the story is look at your policies and don't let them get old. So now let's drill down yet one more to our little funnel to procedures. Very, very fine-tuned here. These are detailed steps. These are not going to be general and concise. These are by definition detailed. A lot of them may not be written down because there are practices that have evolved over time. If you have these, I just encourage you, please write them down. Let me tell you why. I am at the tail end of the baby boomers. So those of you who have been in government long know the baby boomers were the biggest generation at one time in the workforce. And we've all been retiring. I'm at the tail end of that, okay? And what does that mean? All that knowledge in those people's head is walking out the door on the day they retire. You've got to get it out of their head, and you've got to get it written down. So if it is not written down, you have to get it written down. Okay, pick their brain, get it written down. We're going to do that. It's not that hard. They're not adopted by the governing body. Procedures generally are thou shalts. Finance procedures, I want to say, are probably thou shalts from your, and I'm going to use the term CFO, which is the position of your chief financial, whatever that person is called. And they can be lengthy. They need to be lengthy because you're going to want to follow those. Staff level directives, okay? So a lot more narrow, and they tie to a law. They tie to a policy. So it's good when you're writing them that you get the policy. A lot of times, I'll talk about that in the sections, that you reference the policy that it applies to. And some of your procedures will not have policies or will be very general policies. So why do we need them written down? Because our written procedures are the documentation of our internal controls. Auditors love our written procedures, but they're not the only ones, as you will find out, okay? And so we have to realize, y'all, this is so important. Every one of us has a role in internal controls. Internal controls are the things that keep us operating effectively and efficiently. They help us to know that our financial statements and the records we produce are accurate, and they help us comply with laws. They're the combination of policies, procedures, and people, okay, that do that. That's our internal controls. No matter what your role is, you have to do that. Our role as employees when we have written procedures is to follow them. That's what we have to do. So, and you have to hold people accountable. So if you get a new hire and she is not performing a procedure correctly, and you're next to her, or you get that document in the next chain of that workflow, you've got to teach her. You've got to say, look, you forgot to look at this. It's just a teaching moment. We're not firing anybody. We're not saying anybody's incompetent. It isn't like that. It's a teaching moment. I just want to share with you that this is how it needs to be. Have to hold them accountable, okay? Outside parties, what does that mean? I used to not know what this meant, but it means the people that we contract with, and they also have to know our rules. And the application of that is the ethics code. So if you get a vendor from out of state who wants to give you a ham for a Christmas present because they've done a lot of business with you this year and you're the purchasing agent, can you accept the ham as a Christmas present? No. That's where the roles and responsibilities come in. You have to say, very nice thought, I really appreciate it, but I cannot accept that gift for you. So you have to share those with your outside parties. All right, so our accounting procedures manual has a lot of our procedures in them. What exactly kind of like are procedures? So these are the kinds of things that are procedures. These are more the hard kinds of things: approvals, reviews, reconciliations, our filing, our record retention for things like that, using pre-numbered forms. In the old day, we had them printed. In a new day, our computer automatically generates them. I hope this is my water. If it's not, well, sorry. All right, so using our pre-numbered forms, exception reports, they tell us like what's different, what changed through that, and all of those. You have to hold people accountable. I will tell you this, high-performing people love to be held accountable. They do. They're like, Diane, did you do this? And I can say, yep, I sure did. And they're like, well, you messed up on here. I'm, oh, Lord, how did I oh, heavens, what was I doing, you know? And I find out where I messed up, and I learn why I messed up, because I have to know why I messed up, and what's the right way to do it. And now you hold me accountable because you have taught me, okay, to always get that part right. I'm going to make another mistake because I'm human. But I ought not be making that mistake every single time, because that says there's something wrong up here. Like, what's the matter with you? I've told you this 4 times. You have to get it right. Hold people accountable. Hold them. It's a big part of internal controls. All right, when we talk about all these things, when we talk about laws, when we talk about policies, when we talk about procedures, we have to consider the tension between control and flexibility. Okay, this is a tension. You can't have both. So the more control you have, the less flexibility you have. The more flexibility you have, the less control. So some of us in here like to be flexible, like to consider options, be open-minded. Didn't Jennifer tell it? Be open-minded. Okay, let me see if I can be open-minded on this. Let me see if I can be flexible. Other times, no ma'am, no, there's no judgment there. So what you have to know when you're writing your procedures, your accounting procedures, is when do I need control and when do I need flexibility? Because you need both. Okay, that both have strengths. So when do you want control? When it's my way or the highway. So when you think about things like control, I would think about things like, for example, bank reconciliations need to be done. In my organization, they needed to be done, was it 10 or 15 days after the month ended? End of discussion. 10 or 15, all bank accounts reconciled every month by the 10th or the 15th. I can't remember, okay? I had full control on that. I needed that. Why? Because I needed them done because they had to get done before I could issue financial statements and get them to my governing body on time. I needed to control that deadline. That was not going to be open to be able to be done in 2 months. No, ma'am. Not going to happen. Flexibility. Okay, so what kind of things do we need flexibility for? The biggest one that comes to mind for me here is that doggone budget process. That budget process. And look, it's all of those things, isn't it? The budget is not a standard like a bank rec, all the time to get it done. No, a budget changes. But it's an estimate. How's your estimate made? What's going on in the world? It changes. You get new administrations, you get new people, you get new information, you get a new revenue source. You need flexibility. But you also need the level of control that says, let me comply by the date that I'm required to adopt it. So just understand that and understand the difference between those two as you're writing those procedures to think about that. All right, so what is our accounting procedures manual? It's basically a comprehensive guide that says how we do that. Why? Because we want our information to be correct, we want it to be timely, right? And we want to be consistent. The other thing we want is we want to comply. Okay, so grants require compliance, debt requires compliance, budgeting requires compliance. So it also helps us with that. So let's take a look. This is the sales pitch. This is the motivating. We got 2 of these slides. Diane, why are you going to make me do all this work? Do you know how much work I already have to do? Do you know who's calling me? All the emails you get, the people in your town? Yeah, the Public Records Act you have to respond to within 72 hours? Yeah, we know. Still, you have to get this done. So when you look at these benefits, the biggest thing to say to summarize it all up is that it helps to ensure that compliance. It helps to ensure the consistency. It clearly communicates. Think of your new employees. I have been at places where I thought that was her job. No, Diane, you were supposed to do that. Well, nobody told me. I didn't know. Okay, clearly delineating that staff responsibility, who does what. They are always very, very good for training. Very, very good for training and orientation on that. Sometimes you do have complex information. And a way for me, I am more of a visual learner. So when I have complex stuff, it's like I can't sort it out in my head. I need a flow chart. I need to visualize. Whenever they used to ask me, Diane, here's the situation. Is this a component unit or not? Okay, I'm in the flow chart in GASB 14. That's where I am. That's where I live, in the flow chart, So that's kind of how I am. So you may want to do that. It definitely helps to present that complex information, and it definitely can be used as a reference. Also, when it's written in your accounting procedures manual that the superintendent has said that the chief financial officer is authorized to sign checks, you now have it in writing that that person is authorized to sign checks. So now you can go from this check with Diane Allison's signature on it back to a written procedure, back to a policy where the board said the superintendent or his designee can sign a check. You see what I'm saying? That helps. That is so good. Like, because what we'll see is, how did you come to be able to do, I don't know. I mean, the CFO before me signed checks, so I'm just signing. It's the way we've always done it. Now you know why. It's written down. And it definitely helps with that transparency and accountability. So let's talk about communicating, because I don't think I've talked about communicating your policies and your procedures. So here's how it goes. Laws definitely broadcast. We have to know. They say ignorance of the law is no defense. So, which is why you see speed limit signs very frequently, because Diane will say, I didn't know the speed limit when I get pulled over. And the kind officer says, you passed up a sign about a couple hundred yards away. Oh, okay, I skipped that one. So, and he writes me a ticket because for the privilege of driving on his road at a higher speed than what I was supposed to, okay? So, laws broadcast wide, and they're on our legislature's website for all the world to see, literally all the world. I need you to remember that. Things that get posted on your website, all the world can see, okay? Hang on to that thought. Policies. Policies are no good if they are in a book. I've been to a place. They are in a book and they're on the shelf in the CEO's office, really nice. They look nice. They look nice. You take a picture in front of the policy books. Looks really, really good. But the CEO locks his office when he's not there. And so now you can't go in and find out what the policy is. Not very good. Do you want your policies on the website? I think it's okay to put them on the website. I am thankful for all the people that do put them on the website. You may or may not, it depends. But another place, you have to realize who needs to see your policies. A lot of times the general public needs to see your policies. That's when you'd have them on the website, okay? But your employees need to see them too, to abide by them. So you may have them on the intranet, which is your local intranet that only employees can look at. So remember that, because now we're getting to accounting procedures. Accounting procedures is not for the world to see. Don't post them on your website. They are very, very narrow. Why? Because they document your internal controls. What happens with this? If the fraudster in Romania knows and you have posted a form that says, if I'm an employee and I want to change my direct deposit information, the procedure is get the form, fill it out, email it to the payroll department. Okay? You don't want that. You don't want that on the website, because that dude will do that. Okay? No. So those stay very local for the people who need to know them. Remember that. They don't get broadcast. Now, to all the people, some of you are in this audience, who have been so kind as to help me when I have had to write certain accounting procedures manual, and I'll call somebody and say, do you have a written procedure on this? Can I see it? They send it to me. I have sent people procedures. So it's okay to do that, okay, to share with somebody. And that's part of what you're going to do when you research, when you start writing this. For example, you get your organization decided we're going to have credit cards. So you're the CFO and you're like, hold the phone. We're not having any credit cards until we have a policy, until I have procedures. So now you're going to call somebody who you know and says, can you send me your credit card procedures? Let me see if I like them or not. Okay, and tweak them. So you are going to do that, but do not post them, because it is the documentation of your internal controls. Okay, so now let's get down to our accounting procedures manual. We have all our context. We're ready to roll up our sleeves. We're ready to get to work. We're ready to start writing our sessions. Okay, our sections of our manual. So I've read a lot of these. I love accounting procedure. Can you tell? And I read them, and I look at them through the years because they change. They do change. When they change, all the people in this audience will say, when you get new software, every time you do an ERP implementation, throw out the old book, get a new book, because things change. Why did you implement your new ERP system in the first place? Because we want to get rid of our manual processes and have things more automated. We don't want to do paper forms anymore. We want the form to be an electronic form in our software. Okay, it will change. So I love reading them for that, and I kind of came up with this. To some of you, you're like, yeah, mine is much better than this, but to others of you, it's like, okay, I can do this. I can do this part. So let's talk about what would be in an introductory section. So basically, you'd have 3 sections of your accounting procedures manual. You have like the introductory, which kind of lays the foundation, like, all introductions do. You have the procedures themselves. Some people will actually put the policies in the same document, that just the financial policies in the same document that apply to those procedures. Others don't. I used to be one that had 2. I had my written procedures and I had my policies, and I got tired of trying to figure it out into which book do I look at, and I finally combined them into one, and the policies are basically like an appendix. So I just offer that to you to see what works best for you in there. So in our introductory section, you know what? We work in great governments, and our governments do great things. We do great things in our community. We serve great functions. We have a lot of great people in Louisiana. We have good festivals. We have good food. We do. Talk about what that is. Frame that up. What's your mission? What's your core values? You're going to put those kinds of things in there. You're going to introduce the manual. So what does that mean? You're going to put it in reference to in reference with other things. For example, in a lot of accounting procedures manual, they do not put things like how long you have to work here to earn certain paid time off, sick and leave and vacation, right? That's not there. That's in another handbook called an employee handbook, maybe. Here are the rules. Here are the rules about when you have to submit your timesheets to get paid and all of those kind of rules. So you may reference a lot of times purchasing departments, because of public bid and the intricacies of that. Purchasing departments may have their own manuals. So this is accounting procedures at a higher level. So if you're referencing other manuals, you're going to put that in the introduction section and in those sections that say go see this manual, because it has a lot more information for that. You should definitely have a list of your major accounting tasks. And this was an eye-opener to me when I first did this, because I had people responsible, but then I got to be a smart aleck, I can be a smart aleck, and I said, okay, let me think about what happens when so-and-so's, my primary, is out, because people do take vacations, and they need to take vacations, because that's what makes us come back to work refreshed and enthusiastic and ready to go and handle our job, okay? It refreshes us. We need to do that. So then I started putting in who's secondarily responsible. And you know what I found out when I first did this? I worked at a place that had 17 people in the finance office. What I found out was I had holes in my internal controls, because I had primary things that had no secondary. So what did that do? It taught me where my holes were, and I had to cross-train people. And people got excited about it, because they would go look at that stuff and they say, I want to learn investments, but I'm neither primary nor secondary. How will I ever learn how to invest public funds? And I'm like, okay, well, maybe next year we'll move you there. We'll get you to be secondary there, or something like that. So that's a great thing to have. You definitely want to include your leadership and your org chart. Your auditor will look at this. One of the primary audiences of your accounting procedures manual is your auditor. And so they're going to look at that, and what do they call that chart? They call that the decision makers. What you call that is people that have authority, people that approve. They want to know who those people are and where do they sit on the chart. Why do they need to know where they sit on the chart, who they report to? To have your control environment part of your internal controls. They need to know that, okay? And then you're going to have goals. We're going to talk about goals. It's always good to have goals. You'll always need goals. So these are things that Diane gets a harebrained idea. They always come to me when I'm driving home at about 2 a.m. and in the shower. That's when I get harebrained ideas. And then I'm like, wow, that's a great idea. Let me see if we can, let me think about it some more and talk with other people about it and see if this is something we can implement. And one day it may get shot down as like, that's not a good idea. But other times it really does become a great idea. Have a goal. And then your calendar of your major financial events that you're going to want to have there. So that's basically that. Let's go over a few of those things in a little more detail. Your list of your major tasks. So these are kind of the major. Now, your organization is going to be different. These are very general that you can see, right? And so you may or may not, for example, if you don't have, you may not have investments. You may not have enough money to invest or something like that. You may not have that as a process, but you may. So these are some that you have, like, you know, controlling evidence rooms is not on here. So you may have all of those. So those major tasks and who's responsible, those are some bigger organizations, like in a place where I worked, accounts payable, we had 2.5 people who did accounts payable. So it wouldn't be enough to just have that. It's like, how do we handle this kind of accounts payable and that kind of accounts payable with it? So just know that's your list. Major events that you're going to want to put in there for your calendar. These are the things, definitely the start and end of your fiscal year, definitely when your budget's due. Add in the millage adoption. Don't lose sight of that. It can be really, really bad if you miss deadlines, so you're going to want to get that in there. Your audit, definitely when your audit's due. Back up, even if you don't know exact dates. You know, I had a fiscal year that ended June 30th. So our auditors came in July to do statewide agreed upon procedures, and that first week in October, like that was it. You knew. So I just put the first week in October. Was it Tuesday or Wednesday? I don't know. I just put the first week in October so that we could get a general idea and block that out, and we could all work towards that deadline, right? Because you have to communicate those things out to them. Put in your payroll tax filings, put in your grant deadlines that you have. You may have your performance period, you may have your reporting. Some will report every month, others will report every quarter. You know, some require weird reporting times, whatever. You have to know. Put it all in there. You can be really liberal. This is just a suggested list, but there again, in your organization, you're going to have different ones. Okay, goals. Let's talk about goals, because you're going to have those things. When you set goals, Diane has a goal, which is to like exercise more, because my heart doctor said exercise more. Don't you come back here next year without exercising more. I got 1 year. Well, I think I might have 10 months now. So it's like, okay, but I don't have a specific goal. He just said exercise more. I'm like, okay, what's exercise? You know, so it's got to be specific. It's got to be measurable. How am I going to measure my exercise? Am I exercising right now, walking on the stage? The answer is no, because the definition of exercise is elevated heart rate for at least 30 minutes, consecutive 30 minutes. So this is not happening. It's got to be measurable. It's got to be attainable. I think exercising every day is attainable. There are many of you in the room and online who do it, so I know you're my inspiration. You can do it. I just haven't got the let out and figured out a way yet. It's got to be relevant. It definitely is relevant because it affects my heart and my wonderful history of heart disease in my family. And it's got to be timely, okay? It can't, he told me, don't you come back here next year without that. So I can't start exercising every day the week before I see him again next year. I have to do it sooner than that. Set your goals, okay, for that. There are also smarter goals. The E is enthusiastic. So you want to have a goal that you're energized by, okay, not just blah, 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 blah. And then you also, the R is risky. So, wow, we talked about attainable, but risky may be, I don't know if I'm going to be able to reach that goal or not. But we're going to try. What does that do? That just stretches us. It just stretches us. For some of you, it's a stretch to finally write an accounting procedures manual in your organization or to locate yours and take it off the shelf to do it. So this is a sample. The other thing you're going to do now is you're going to figure out your table of contents. So these are the kinds of things, and this is, there again, this is supposed to be just to help you get started on things, okay, just to help you get started. So these are the kinds of things that you're going to want to have in your accounting procedures manual. Take a look, which ones apply to you, which ones don't, add the ones that do. It's just a suggestion. So we're going to go really fast now because I can't believe I didn't plan my time better. Okay, so here's the kinds of things to look at putting in there. You definitely want filing, which speaks to Jennifer's presentation on the Records Act, right? On public records, to be able to locate those things, how long you have those and those kinds of things, and reference those policies. Your level of detail, this is key. Okay, so you may want to have an overview section. That's a very low level of detail. Then you have a medium level of detail that somebody can follow. That's how your auditors kind of like it. And then you have a very high level of detail, which is step 1, step 2. Open the screen, do this. You know, pull up this document, compare the screen to this document. Yeah, that's a very high level of detail. You will use in your manual a combination of all three. I'm going to tell you that. That it is good to have that very low level of detail at the beginning of each section in your overview, because that's somebody who just wants the 30-second thing of how you do cash disbursements, you know, and they just want to see that one thing. Definitely to do that. So let's talk about cash receipts. There are a couple laws. This is writing the manual. There are a couple of laws that affect cash receipts. The most important things are, you know, you have to pick your bank. They have to be deposited daily. Bonding employees who handle cash, that's an important thing. And so there you go. So there are some laws. Again, not comprehensive because I didn't have time to do a search, nor is that my wheelhouse. So but that's what we're going to do. We're going to research. And then we're going to look at some policy. So what kinds of things from those laws are we going to want in policy? We're probably going to want a requirement that everybody who handles cash or assets needs to have a surety bond, be covered under an employee theft policy, right? We definitely are going to want to require in our policy that management safeguard the assets. It's not like you can just say, I collect cash and it sits on a desk. You know, I've been to a government where the cash literally sat on a desk in an open room. Now, it was closed. It was just to employees. There might have been 6 employees worked in that room, and then other employees came and went. And here's a bundle of money sitting on a desk. Like so you're going to want to put in a policy to safeguard it. And then you might want to consider putting in a policy that your CEO knows about all of your bank accounts. And so I'm going to leave that to Thomas. He's going to talk about how things can go awry when there are bank accounts that people don't know about. And so then you're going to also want to talk about having that proper segregation of duties. And you may we recommend put in a policy if you're one who collects utilities or uses cash at concessions and things like that, that you have 1 employee to 1 cash drawer. All right, now we've got our policy, so let's start writing it. So first we're going to have a purpose and a scope, you know, to make sure that all the money gets collected and it all gets deposited at the bank. And then we're going to have that overview that describes. We're going to talk about, in our organization, how does money come in? What are the major sources of revenue? How does it come in? For that, and what are the procedures? You're going to have different procedure if it comes in the mail, electronically, paid in cash, walk-in. You're going to have all of that. And then you're going to have your procedures. So you're going to have, and for my illustrative purposes, I just called different people red, green, and blue. So we have 3 employees, red, green, and blue, and this was kind of like the segregation of duties. So this is the paragraph that describes that. Y'all can take your time and look at that and say she met it or she didn't meet it. And then, okay, what are the procedures that we use? So the first procedure we use in cash receipts is we actually receive the payments. How do they come in? Who does what with those payments? So there you go, you have those steps. And then we have to record those transactions in the accounting software. Who does that? Who records those transactions? Where does it get recorded? For some of you, you have different people record different revenues depending on how it comes in. Some record in a subsidiary ledger, like maybe your utility or your ticket software, and then others record in the general ledger. Or maybe, hopefully, that just gets automatically uploaded to your general ledger. And then there's getting the money to the bank. We do have to deposit those. So what does that look like? Well, it might look a little different if you have cash, if you have checks, how much that you get. What are your procedures for that? So here's your procedures, and here's which employee does which job on depositing. You always have to have reconciliations and reviews. Why? Because we're human, because we make mistakes. So what is that process? How do we know? How are we going to check and find our own mistakes? Because that's okay to do that. That's what you want. To be able to find your own stuff and say, goodness sakes, the total of my receipts does not total up to my deposit. Something's wrong. What did I do wrong? Let me go see. And I can go find, oh, I'm missing a receipt. Here it is, kind of thing. And so what are those processes? And then you definitely have that filing. Where do the documents end up at the end of the process? Who's keeping those? Why? Because your auditor wants to know that, because they're going to say, go pull the documentation for me from March 12th. And you're going to be able to produce that, and it's going to be stellar. Okay, and then you're also going to have, again, we recommend that you refer back to the policies that you're abiding by when you have those written procedures, and list when it was revised. Revised looks different ways. Some people will, like this one, just list the last revision. Some will say all revisions through time. It don't matter. There's no right or wrong way. Just make sure that you know when the thing was last looked at. Hopefully it wasn't 2008. I'm just saying. Okay, so now here's the slide that says, all right, Diane, I guess you convinced me. How in heaven's name do I get started on this task? So my wonderful husband used to say all the time, and I hated it when he said this. So if you hate it, it's okay. He says, the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And you know what? He's true. He's right. He's right. If you go tell him that, we're going to have words, because he knows he's not often right, but he is right. And so you just have to start somewhere. I just wanted to give you a few tips for getting started. Your auditor has some internal control memos. That's a good place to get started. Talk to people. You know people. You know people in similar governments. If you're a town, you know somebody in another town through your connections like an LMA and things like that. Call them, ask them, like, how did you do it? If you're a school district, call another school district, whatever. Find out the ones. So call and ask. When I was doing it, a lot of times I would Google. Now you can ask AI, but AI gives you wrong answers. Been there, done that. They give you wrong answers. So a better way for me on policies and procedures was Googling, because universities are very proud of their policies and they put them out there, and they have some procedures out there as well, so they probably are careful on which procedures they put out and which ones they don't, but you can go research those. So there's a wealth of information out there. The point is that you get started and create that table of contents. It will change every year. But just get started. Just that's one way to do it. And then go through and start writing them. And then gather your fiscal policies and then just start writing it. And sometimes when you have a bad day and a lot of pressures and you want to do something different, then you take this project out and you say, let me start writing. Because a lot of times the day's activities are going to be more of a higher priority and time deadline than this. So the point is, just get started. So thank you so much for listening. And